Not my old school. I think it'd be useful. Yeah, but I mean, the way you have it set, I could give you access to the entire thing, and then I'm out of everything. I wouldn't say that if I hadn't been burned by a couple big companies before. Hello everybody. This is Andrew, and I'm here to do another one of our office hours. Our office hours is something I do on a monthly basis. Usually it's the third Wednesday of the month. This month is a bit of a change to that, where instead we're doing it on Thursday because of a conflict of the class that I'm teaching, wrapping up actually this week. That would conflict with our normal time on Wednesday. So I moved this over to Thursday. That's why this is recorded and being streamed at a different time or alternative time. I want to go and dive right into this, kind of explain a little bit, introduce myself for those of you who are new here, and then also explain what you can expect from our office hours. So today, switch over here to my slides. All right, so our office hours, this is for our monthly office hours, and the intention of this, or the reason I hold these, is to answer questions that anybody has that wants to submit them ahead of time, or anyone who wants to, I see a little bit of reverb here, let me switch that, see if that fixes things. Let me know if that fixed the audio. It's like something got enabled that wasn't supposed to be on. Someone just let me know if the audio just got fixed. I know there's a little bit of a delay, so I'm just going to keep going for a second. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and explain, do a little more of this, of our intro here while I'm waiting for someone in the chat just to let me know that everything just got fixed. Yep, fixed. Awesome. Thank you very much. All right. Anyway, sorry about that. All of my microphones were disabled when I started this. Don't know why they were disabled, so I went back and enabled one, and then everything apparently enabled both of them. So my bad. Okay, so my monthly office hours. These are a way for you to ask questions about Microsoft 365 development topics. Primarily, I focus on the SharePoint Framework and Microsoft Teams, but I can talk about anything. And as you'll see, because I have a few questions from some people who submitted some stuff ahead of time. One of them is about SharePoint Embedded. So that's from Sabi. We will tackle that towards the end of our, or when I get to the part after a couple other things. What I like to do actually is I like to have a couple things prepared in case nobody has questions. A couple things to present unless people have questions, because the primary reason for me or doing this is to answer your questions. So I only got 2 questions submitted ahead of time. So I'm going to do a couple little things first, and then we'll come back to those 2 questions. One from Savi about SharePoint Embedded, and then the other question was from Daniel about the Teams project file and the different operations we can run in the project file. So to get started with this, though, let me just quickly introduce myself. My name is Andrew Connell. I've been doing this Microsoft 365 development stuff since way before it was Microsoft 365. In fact, I just picked up, or just was got an update that last week my MVP award was renewed for the 20th year. That's a little scary when I think about it, because it means that I've been doing this for a very long time. So it makes me feel a little old. As you can see from the picture there, I like to cut my hair short so you can't see the gray. But anyway, I've been doing SharePoint development since 2003. Also got a lot of experience around the other topics you see listed there at the top of the slide. As I said, I'm a Microsoft MVP in the subject area or discipline for Microsoft 365 development. And I'm the one behind Voitanos. I'm the one that started Voitanos. It really is just me, where my mission is to make you a better Microsoft 365 full stack developer. And related topics. A couple things I do want to call out here. There's a bunch of links that I have down there on the social side. I have a YouTube channel. I'm on LinkedIn, Threads, X, Instagram, GitHub as well. You can find all my links from the voitanos.social link. You can find each one of those profiles. They're all linked at the top of that page. I also maintain and publish a bi-weekly newsletter. You can learn more about that from newsletter.voitanos.io. It's a free newsletter, 100% free. You can unsubscribe, one click unsubscribe at any time. And what I like to do in that newsletter is to give you some insights into the Microsoft 365 world. I like to also maybe give you my opinions on some stuff. But I also like to give you an update on the latest news that's in the Microsoft 365 developer space. So between that, it's a really short bit. I find like anywhere from 2 to 5 news items that are specific to 365 developers. I give you 1 or 2 sentences as an update with a link to where you can go learn more if you want. The newsletter also has some links to the recent content that I've published, like articles on my blog that you can find on voitanos.io or on the videos I published to YouTube. And then also some fun links as well. So you can learn more about that at newsletter.voitanos.io. We'd love it if you'd subscribe and share it with your friends. As I said, it's free. Other thing that's kind of cool today that's a bit of an update, or not a bit of an update, is I also got word last week that finally, after 11 months, I got word that my trademark application for Voitanos was finally approved by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So now I get the little R trademark in the top right corner of my of the company name of Voitanos. Yeah, so you can learn more about me. You can find more stuff here at that at these links that you see that I've posted here. All right, so my agenda, the way I like to do this, I'm going to focus on 3 primary things: SharePoint Framework and Microsoft Teams. And I got a few updates around SharePoint Framework, a few updates around Microsoft Teams, including some issues that I've seen that are some trending issues. You'll notice a little bit of a different format here that I'm diving in, so it'll be interesting to see that. I also, if you have any questions, if you would, post them in the chat. I see, Rick, you just posted one here. Thanks a lot. If you post your messages here in the chat, I will come back to those questions. If they're timely based on what I'm covering right now, I'll definitely address them there when the topics come up. But I will answer all questions that you post in the chat. We'll make sure that we have time for that. And if it means I got to cut some of the stuff I plan to do, I will do that. I will absolutely do that. I'm going to go through this news stuff kind of at a quick pace before we dive into the questions. So if you do have questions of stuff that's coming up, I am going to go through it kind of quick because I want to have the most time to engage and talk to everybody here. So let's go ahead and dive into this. So really quick, SharePoint Framework State of the Union. Where are we today? We're still at version 1.19. I don't expect to see anything new from this anytime soon in a new release from Microsoft, primarily because seems like everybody at Microsoft is currently on vacation and they're all out of town. So I don't expect to see anything coming up here. One other thing too, if you have a question, like I said, post it in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it. I am also looking at, I'll just pull this up really quick to show you. I'm also watching our Discord community, and specifically there is an office hours section that students of my courses have access to. And if you've connected your Discord account to your Voitanos account, if you want to learn more how to do that, voitanos.io/discord. And you'll find a link here or a post for the July 2024 office hours. So if you go to the office hours section, you'll see that one is the top one. If you go ahead and pick this, you can post a question. I'm watching that. My students get the priority on their questions getting answered. So I will definitely address the questions that have been submitted ahead of time and questions that have been submitted for my students first. Some of you that are posting questions on YouTube, I recognize you as a student, but not everybody's name when you signed in in the chat, I can tell who you are. And so if I miss you and students are taking priority because they posted in the office hours, that's why. So I'm not ignoring you, but I want to make sure my students get the priority here to be able to ask their questions during our office hours. I'm not going to really dive into too much here that we see with the SharePoint framework on 1.19. There's really nothing new to say. I did see some people run into some issues with this Webpack 5 update and some issues that they were having. Specifically, it looked like all of those issues that they ran into were related really exclusively just with the the patterns and practices React controls. That's a specific issue with that. Now they talk about how they fixed it in like a V4, but V4 isn't GA yet. There are ways to fix it. Basically, people running into a Webpack issue where you got like object in the build issues that came together. You just had to dig in and kind of figure all those things out. We did have a pretty sizable thread where we discussed this here in our class, or in the GitHub repo. I think that was in Webpack issue. Is that right? Webpack issue error on gulp serve. Yeah. So we were getting an error that you see right here where we're showing object. Stefan Bauer actually had a really good post that he called it out. He's in here somewhere. There he is. Where he was posted a link to where he was helping people understand like what was going on with this and how to go ahead and get around it. Right now, though, it looks like it's primarily just people that are using the patterns and practices controls are the ones that are affected by it. Yeah. Okay, so that's the only one I wanted to cover with that one. A couple other things too that are important that I want to make sure that we highlight here. One of them is around the SharePoint framework, is around the isolated web part retirement. Seeing a little bit of confusion about this. What Microsoft is doing is they're simply turning off the isolated web part retirement. This is going to start in April of 2025, where it's going to be turned off for any new tenants that are created effective April 2nd. And then as of April 2nd, 2026, they're going to be turned off altogether. The one thing I mentioned, one thing I want to call this out on today is because I've noticed I've gotten a couple questions from some students, and then I saw a pretty sizable exchange recently in our Discord community about some confusion where people thought that I can't assign permissions to a SharePoint Framework component anymore. That has nothing to do with this. Absolutely nothing. There's two different things going on here. When you deploy a SharePoint Framework project and you need to grant it API permissions, like for example, you need to give it access specific scope to Microsoft Graph or to a custom endpoint that you create. You can do that in one of two ways, okay? You can grant that, let me say that again. You can deploy your solution in one of two ways. You can deploy it like normal, where you don't do anything else special, and when you grant the permission is being granted to your entire SharePoint Online tenant. The other option that we have is to use isolated web parts, where there's a flag that you set in your package solution.json file in your SharePoint Framework project. What that does is that when the web part is added to the page, it is not rendered on the page. It's rendered within an iframe that is pointing to a custom domain. That custom domain is also mapped to a unique Microsoft Intra ID application where you can grant permissions just to that one Intra ID application. That way your permission is not granted to the entire tenant. It's just granted to one domain, which is the only domain that your web part is running on. The isolated web part, the ability to have a web part render within an iframe, that's what's going away. You can still assign permissions to the entire SharePoint Online tenant, but we're losing isolated web parts instead. So why are they doing this? There's a couple different reasons why they're doing this. One of them is one of the reasons that they're doing this is because of let's see, what is it? There is that Microsoft says there's a third-party cookie issue. Where with all the tracking stuff and the security stuff or the privacy stuff that people are doing with different browsers and different devices are doing, they're saying they're not reliable. They're also not a big fan of iframes for performance reasons. Their guidance is migrate away from isolated web parts today. Problem is, they've only said that they're working on something that's going to replace this and give us a better option, but they've said nothing about what that is. So my guidance is take inventory of what's there. Don't feel that you're going to migrate your stuff right away. There's a long time. We got over a year before this is going to happen. So let's give them a little more time to try and figure out what's going on, and then we'll see what option they are providing for us and evaluate that as a potential alternative going forward. Okay. All right. The next thing that we have here is related to Microsoft Teams. Another bit of Microsoft Teams related news. Microsoft has, let me make sure my notifications are turned off really quick. I always forget to do that until right when I'm starting a class. Okay, so the other thing that we have with this is Microsoft Teams is retiring Office 365 connectors. This is actually going to be the subject of my next newsletter that's going to come out next Tuesday with some guidance on what you should do. I'll give you a bit of a preview on it though. So Microsoft is saying, and this is a pretty aggressive timeline. Now, what they're saying is that any new Office 365 connectors are going to be, any submissions are going to be blocked starting on August 15th. That's less than a month away. They'll be blocked from any new ones being submitted. And then in just a month and a half later, on October the 1st, they're going to shut all existing Office 365 connectors. So really quick, what is an Office 365 connector in Teams? In Teams, we have this concept of webhooks. If you're familiar with webhooks, how they normally work with like Microsoft Graph or other web-based properties, that is not what this is. That is not what this is. We have an Office 360, what a webhook is in Teams, there's two types. There's an outgoing one where I can do a one-off registration, and that one-off registration is going to go whenever I mention the outgoing webhook inside of a conversation, it'll send the entire message to a web service that I specify. That is a manual-based registration. The other type is an incoming webhook, where you create an incoming webhook. When you do that, Teams will give you a URL, an endpoint, and you have an external service that's going to do an HTTP post to that endpoint with a message that'll be added to a channel. Again, that's a manual registration. So if you want to do it in 5 different channels, you'd have to go to 5 different channels, create a registration, you get 5 different links, and then you go over to your web service, and you're going to have to update your web service or process that submits a post over to Teams to do that post to 5 different endpoints that you record there. What an Office 365 connector is it takes that latter option of the incoming webhook and it makes it more installable. So you can pick a connector as an app inside of Teams and install it into a channel. And when you do that, it's going to launch a configuration page that you are going to own, that you're going to create, just like when you create a channel tab or a group chat tab, you have a configuration page. So it'll launch a configuration page. You can collect any additional details from the user, or they just click save. And when they click save, you're going to have some code running in the configuration page that is going to go to use the Teams JavaScript API to go extract the URL for the incoming webhook that Teams is generating, and then you are going to go save that to where your web service or your web process is running, so that there's no manual kind of copy and paste the URL for you. Connectors are going away. Now, why is Microsoft doing this? Now, they're not being very specific, but the primary reason they've said publicly in the link that I've got down at the bottom here, and actually let me grab both of these links and put these in the chat so that you guys have these as reference for the 2 news items I've already gone through so far. There we go, put that in the chat. Also, for those of you watching this, I only posted 1 link. Let me fix that really quick. Let's grab the first one. And then let me grab the second one. There we go. Okay. Also, these links, you'll be able to get to these links after the you'll be able to get to these links after the webinar or the live stream has been live for about 24 hours or has been recorded and published for about 24 hours. It won't show it in the live chat when you go back and watch the recording. These things, it's just YouTube takes about 24 hours to include the live chat. It is enabled and it will show up. Microsoft is getting rid of this as part of their secure initiative to where they're locking things down. Now, my theory on this is they don't want to maintain, the Teams group has to maintain their own web service infrastructure for maintaining these incoming and outgoing webhooks. And what they instead, I think, are doing is they would rather rely on the more secure and robust system of using the Azure AI bot service, or Azure bot service. With that, there is a channel that you connect your Azure AI bot service. When you create a bot, you connect it over to Teams. So Teams has a secure communication back and forth with the bot service, and then the bot service then communicates with your web service. The replacement for a Office 365 connector would be what Microsoft calls either a notification bot or a proactive messaging bot. They're the exact same thing. It's how you're building it. Essentially, you create a bot and you specify that bot is your code will then connect to the Azure AI bot service in a secure way using Microsoft Entra, and will then submit the message to the channels where that bot has been installed. So my guidance for you, or Microsoft's guidance, is you should instead be using something like Power Automate or this new workflows tool that they've created. Those are great for makers, but they're not great for, I think, they're not great options for everything, for like developers, especially when you want to integrate an existing system. So what I would recommend you do is to, you could use either one of those options I just mentioned, workflows or Power Automate, that are referenced in that blog post. But I would instead, at least as far as developers are concerned, consider building a notification bot. If you want to learn more about this, just keep an eye out for my newsletter that's going to come out next week. And if you're tuning in late, you can subscribe to that via newsletter.voitanos.io. I do see a bunch of questions in the chat going back and forth to like guest access that you guys are having a conversation. So I will come back to that and review it and offer my thoughts in just a minute. Okay, next up here, switch to my next slide. Couple trending issues that I've noticed that are popping up in the Teams and in the SharePoint space. One of them in the SharePoint space is that there are the new list UI that was rolling out to move this down. The new list UI that was rolling out to SharePoint Online. Field customizers and command sets were not working in that new list UI. Microsoft has acknowledged that their test suite that they ran to verify the new list UI did not account for some things that developers have notified them of in this issue that I have linked right here. I'll grab a link to this issue. Why isn't that letting me copy this? And I'll post this in the chat. There we go. This issue is some users, some customers made Microsoft aware of this, and they've now acknowledged that the fact that it is an issue. They have configured the new list UI to check to see if the list has field customizers or command sets registered on it, and if so, it will not load the new UI. It will load the previous UI until they can get these things resolved. Another issue that we've seen, that I just actually uncovered this in the last like 48 hours, it hasn't gotten much attention at all yet, but it's related to Microsoft Teams. And if you build, this actually came up in a class that I'm teaching this week, if you create a tab project that leverages SSO, if you create it in the last like few weeks, Microsoft has, between two of their packages, they've created a conflict that is causing SSO to break and acquisition of a token to break inside of your projects. If you're doing any token acquisition beyond just the SSO token, if you're doing any token acquisition to like call Microsoft Graph from client side, it won't work. The reason for this is because under the covers, they're using the MSAL JavaScript library for web library, and one of those includes a package called MSAL browser, MSAL-browser. Their packages have conflicting versions where they are referencing and taking dependencies on MSAL browser version 2 and version 3, and then they're referencing in the authentication pop-ups MSAL version 2. That's causing all kinds of headaches. The way you fix this is if you install very specific versions of the Microsoft Teams, the @Microsoft /TeamsFX package and the @Microsoft Teams FX-React package. I've listed those version numbers you see listed here. That resolved it for me. That fixed those problems. They are still trying to figure out how they're going to fix this, and there's been no ETA on when that's going to get fixed. Nasty little bug. The way I like to get around this, though, you can install specific versions. Kind of shows why I hate those little carets and like tildes that people put in the npm package dependencies on their package.json. Actually coach you not to use those and just say use specific versions so you can test things. But the default project templates, they do use those from the Teams toolkit today. So if you install those specific versions, that fixes it. But to me, the more reliable way of doing it is to implement a server-side process to where your client-side app is going to call a server-side process that will take your SSO token, use the OAuth2 token flow, authorization flow called on behalf of, to obtain an access token on behalf of the current user, and you use the user's SSO token that you have to make the assertion so the user doesn't have to log in, providing single sign-on. That way, you're not using the MSAL browser library at all. You're just going straight to Intra ID to obtain the token. Another thing that I've noticed, and I've asked them about this, but I haven't heard anything back yet, is it looks like the latest templates, they've thrown out the Azure Function extension that the Teams group created that is usually installed on all Azure Function apps. This thing was like super useful because it would automatically take care of looking at the token that was received in the header of your request, make sure that it's valid, make sure that it was obtained from a valid app ID that you whitelist. So you say that I only support calls from Microsoft Teams and I only support calls from my Teams app that I've created based on his client ID. It checks to see not only is the token valid, but if it's going to expire in the next few minutes, it goes and refreshes it and gets a new one. And then it also creates a context, a Teams context, so that's injected as another input parameter on your Azure function. So just like the request object and just like the context object for the actual for the Azure function, we also can get access to the Teams FX context or the Teams context. So we have things like what channel did the call come from, what team did it come from, who the user is, etc. The latest templates don't include this in the Azure function. And to me, it looks like stuff was upgraded from Azure Functions v3 to v4, but they forgot to add some stuff in there because the docs are even still referring to v3 stuff. It's clear the projects are v4. I don't know. I'm waiting to find out what the deal is with that. The other thing around Teams is it looks like they're taking all of the stuff that was named Teams FX and they're renaming it to Teams Toolkit. So if you go to github.com/office-/teamsfx, that now redirects, or the URL changes over to Teams Toolkit from Teams FX. Let's see, what else we got here? Questions. Okay, so let me just take a quick check at our questions that you guys have submitted. I see Rick, actually, let me do the questions that were submitted ahead of time because you guys were prepared. So let me take care of two of them first. I don't see any questions. Let's check my office hours here. Oh, I do see Rick posted a question. Okay, I will come back to Rick's question in just a minute because I give you these other two questions that were submitted ahead of time. So I see your question in the chat, Rick. Let's go take care of these two first. So I've got one. Let's move me over here so you can see the little question from Savvy. And one from Daniel. So first of all, let's do Savvy's question. So Savvy's got a question, says it's about SharePoint Embedded. So how is he supposed to imagine the authentication of users using the public front end of SharePoint Embedded Solutions? How does the public site where documents are uploaded to the company's own container handle external uploading identities of non-own intra users? And where should they be registered? And what is the technical solution for this? Does the uploader also have a Microsoft account? The users uploading the content also have to have a Microsoft account. So the program will perform multi-tenant authentication maybe. Is it not possible to create a solution where the user does not have a Microsoft ID? So, okay, so with all of that, let me talk about what I know, and then there's something I think that you can do, but you'd have to test this out. So first of all, according to the documentation, it's a little mixed here, but according to the documentation, that applications the apps can act on behalf of a user. So you've got a delegated permission that can be set up, and then so users can log in to your SharePoint embedded app, and they can upload content. Now, what users do you support using your application? Well, you can do single tenant or you can do multi-tenant. Single tenant means only people within the same tenant where the application resides, so where the data is going to reside, which is inside of your existing 365 tenant. Only users from your tenant have access to be able to log into the application. So that's one. If you go with multi-tenant, then that says anybody with a Microsoft 365 tenant or Microsoft ID from Intra ID would be able to access the content. Now that includes not just I don't want to say real users, but that includes not just users in a tenant, but it also includes guest users as well. It could include anybody else that is inside of that other 365 tenant that is maybe a federated user, that is maybe an external user, a guest user. They're all supported. They can all access the content. They can do all of that. So then the question is, is it not possible to create a solution where the user does not have a Microsoft ID? So this is the part where I'm not entirely sure with this. I believe this to be true, but I would have to go back and just dig in a little bit more on this, because the docs are not entirely accurate here. Although I do believe you can do this based on the way I read the docs and from what I've seen. You can have an application access the content without a user involved. And so you could create a way for your users to access your web app. Your web app then, when they upload content, they're uploading it to your web app, and then your web app is saving that content to your SharePoint embedded container. To do that, it's doing it as an application, right? So it's doing it using app-only permissions. The best that I can understand here, this is the reason why I'm saying this. I'll show this to you on the screen here. Is that according to the documentation? So here you go. You can do this on accessing on behalf of a user, but then you can also do access without a user. Oh, let me scroll there. And to do that, your application has to have consent for the permission file storage container .selected, and that's an application permission. The permissions admin consent is coming on the consuming tenant, which is the tenant where who's using the application. All right, not the one where the content is where the person that created the application, but the one where like the content is being stored. Okay, so according to that, I believe that you can do this. I'm just not 100% sure if you have access to the content, because I do see it's a container selected permission that you're going to be granting. So you've got the file storage container .selected, but they should still also be able to read and upload content. Remember though, the content that you're storing in a SharePoint embedded application is going inside of essentially SharePoint document libraries, all right? You can't see them, but that's what they really are. The benefit to SharePoint Embedded is that you get all of the versioning and security and compliance and document management, all of those capabilities that SharePoint has to provide. You get access to all of that stuff inside of your custom application you build. The whole reason for building the custom application is because you want to own the UI. You don't want people to use the SharePoint UI for working with that content. So with that being said, you kind of have to ask yourself that if there's no user involved, you're not getting all of that security and compliance stuff. You're not getting the auditing. You're not getting a lot of the other document management stuff that is all specific to users. So I I would almost kind of ask and say, like, if I don't want users involved at all with this, maybe this SharePoint embedded isn't the right solution for this, because you think about it, you're not getting any of that document management stuff if users aren't real, if you don't have a user that's there, that's as present in the scenario. And if you're not getting that, then you're paying a very significant premium for all of those additional features that you're not able to use when you could be storing your content in an Azure storage blob. So it's a good question. I'm not entirely sure though if you can use application permissions to access content inside of it, inside of your SharePoint embedded containers. I believe you can, but I have to test that out. I haven't thought through that scenario because I'm kind of asking myself, like, why would I want to do that scenario? That's why I haven't done it yet. So I'm not entirely sure. The other question that I have here. So we've got another 24 minutes on our office hours, and I've got one question here in Discord, and that it looks like it's the same question that Rick asked in the chat. Let me just read through what we got here in the chat to make sure that this. And I'm going to come back to Daniel's question because Daniel's got a longer. Daniel's question. I just popped that up on the screen here. Daniel's question is going to be a little bit longer and just kind of explaining and walking through this project. So I'm happy to go through Daniel's question. I just want to make sure that it's going to take longer. So let me just take a look at Rick's question real quick. So Rick said. I see you said it is in Discord, Rick, but I'm not sure what it is in reference to, because you guys are about 20 to 30 seconds behind the live stream. So I'm not sure what the context is of your response there is. So Rick's saying, I've been chatting with Mike Zimmerman and we've been back and forth about limitations with guest users and SharePoint framework usage. Are there any gatyas you've seen for guest users in SharePoint Framework? I told Mike I didn't know of any limitations. Mike said, one thing I was trying to verify was if a guest user could even see a SharePoint Framework web part. I'll try to do some more testing and get a screenshot. But it was the boilerplate error that the JavaScript file does not exist. I went so far as to get the user explicit read permissions on the app catalog. That's not going to do anything. And as a guest, I could actually go to the app catalog and download SharePoint package, but SharePoint would render the web part of the page. Well, yeah, it makes sense, Mike, because the JavaScript file doesn't exist in the app catalog. The app catalog, all it contains is the SPFx file, the actual zip file. The user can't access the content that's in there, or SharePoint's not using the content that's in there. When you install an app into a SharePoint site, the content is going into a special document library inside of the site where you've installed it. The file is going, like the JavaScript files are going into a library called, I think it's client-side assets. That's the place where the JavaScript bundles are being loaded from, and the manifest, where the JavaScript bundles are being loaded from. So it sounds like the user doesn't have access to that. That's the main challenge. JavaScript file, yeah. So I just saw Mike said that so Mike just acknowledged that, yeah, those things aren't there. So looks like Mike has joined us on the office hours. Let's see. So what sort of limitations you're running into? My question. Mike, I see you're typing in the Discord. So if you ask the questions over there, that's fine. But it might be better to go through and to post your messages in the chat on YouTube so that everyone can see the responses, because otherwise only students are going to be able to see that. There is a client-side asset. So Stefan says in the chat that there is client-side assets in the app catalog. That's true, but that's only for used when you are deploying it tenant-wide, or when the application when you're deploying the thing tenant-wide. The application, when you install the apps into your site collection, that's where that stuff is. That's where those things are. That's only when they're all deployed into those individual sites. I think I covered that. Yeah, I think I covered that question. So that's one thing I've seen. In terms of guest user access, honestly, I don't know off the top of my head what you can and can't see. I don't see that. I know there's lots of little edges and stuff related to guest users. Frankly, SharePoint has always had a really bad. I think that SharePoint's had a bad track record when it comes to guest users. in terms of like what's supported and what's not supported, it's always very hard to figure out, and it's always testable. In fact, it can be very tricky when it comes to it can be very tricky. If anybody's done any work with Microsoft and you see Microsoft share something, like everybody can see this, and like the first thing they get back is like, we can't see this, we're all external, we can't see your stuff. I see Rick in the chat, you said, does a public CDN fix it? If it's a public CDN, then there's no authentication on it, there's no checks on it. So yeah, the content should be served up from the public CDN. If you deploy it separately, if it's done with the Office 365 CDN, it should be accessible to the end user. They shouldn't need special access just to client-side assets. Okay, so let me jump over to Daniel's question. This is the last question that I've got right now. And Daniel's asking, what happens during the Teams app provisioning, deploy, and publish steps? This is quite timely. We just talked about this in my class. So I have a 8-week-long, 2-month-long Microsoft Teams accelerator program where I teach Teams app dev to developers. And we're wrapping up our final week this week, and deployment was what we were covering in our class yesterday. Our office hour session for that is tomorrow. If you're interested in learning more about that class, let me just pull this up real quick. I have another cohort of that I'm starting in the middle of September. So if you just go to our site, go to courses and go to Teams app dev and scroll down over here, you'll find the Teams app dev course where you can learn more about it. Got a couple of customer testimonials, and this is when the next one is starting up, is in September. But I can try to answer your question though in the meantime here. So let me pull in the I'm going to pull in my browser here, looking at a GitHub repo. Okay, so for those of you not familiar, Teams projects, Teams Toolkit projects. This is some of the code from the class that I'm teaching right now. This 2-month accelerator. So I'm just going to pull one of the projects up that I'm sharing with my students. Every Teams project now that's created Teams Toolkit has this file called teamsapp.yaml that you see over here on the left-hand side. The teamsapp.local.yaml, that's for a specific environment. So that's for if I'm running just stuff locally. This is for if I'm doing stuff in production or have any other environment that I don't have a specific environment file for. So in this case here, let me just go through and minimize this section here for the production one because it'll make a little more sense. And actually we're going to let me open up the other one too so I can give you the high level for this. Okay. So this first one here, this is all the stuff that is happening. These are 3 different phases of my deployment, or that I can run with my Teams Toolkit based project using the Teams Toolkit CLI. Used to be called the SPFx CLI. So there are 3 phases with this. There's a provision phase, there's a deploy phase, and there's a publish phase. Now, this is what I would do for a production app. I have these 3 different phases. But if you think about it, if I go over to like just doing my local dev and my local testing, where I want things to run off my laptop, I have this environment for .local. And here you can see I've got 2 things, just 2 sections here. I don't have a publish. I have a provision and I have a deploy. So what's going on in this case? Well, the provision phase is when there are things that need to be created inside of Microsoft 365, like in Teams or in Microsoft Intra, in order for your application to work. So you have to create a application. You have to create an application for like an Azure AD application to grant your app permissions. You also have to create a Teams app. So if I look at this provision section, you can see it's creating, in this case here, this is one for a tab application that implements SSO. And what this one is doing is this one is creating an Azure AD app, and then it's creating a Teams app, and then it's running some script, and then it's going to go update the Azure AD Azure AD app after it's been created. So it went ahead and created it, then it went through and made some changes to it, and now it's going to go through and update it. This is primarily done the second time. Like this first time here, this app will be created if it doesn't already exist. If it does exist, the update is going to go through and make any updates to the manifest if it needs to make those changes after the fact. The next thing it does under the provision phase, it validates the Teams app manifest to make sure it's valid. It then is going to create the app package that is going to be uploaded to Microsoft Teams. It doesn't upload it, it just creates it. And then it validates the app package to make sure it's good. It then updates the Teams app with the ID in the manifest to figure out which one the app is. And then it may go through, depending on if your app also is extending its, doing additional features that are being extended to Microsoft 365 or Outlook, it does those as well. So all it's really doing is it's just kind of getting things set up in order to be able to use an application, to create our application. On the deploy phase, this is where stuff is actually getting ready to be deployed up. Anything that needs to be deployed or anything that needs to be built to get to be able to run. So if I scroll down here under the deploy phase, you'll see that first it's checking to make sure that I have all the dev tools installed on my machine. So in this case here, it's going to say, because I'm going to do some builds, I need to have the CLI installed, I need to have Azure Functions installed, etc. So in this case here, this dev tool install, it's got a couple input parameters, but you can see it's going to be hosting a local web server. So I've got to set up a dev cert. It's going to trust it. This func right here, this is for Azure Functions. So make sure what version do I need to use and where is it going to be deployed to. The different properties you see right into an environment file, what that does is if I go over here to env, it's going to create an environment file. So this one is empty, but it would populate these different values that you see that are listed here. So this action right here of dev tool install has a property it's going to output called SSL cert file, an SSL key file, and a function path. It wants to write these out to environment variable properties called SSL cert file or func path. So if I look at the env.dev, you can see where it's going to be doing the where it would write those values out here. Now they're not listed here, but when I do if I did a build, it would actually add those to it. So they don't have to be present. So like if I ran this for local, it would actually create a .env.local right here. Then it's going to do an npm install for my React-based app, for the tab single-page app, the React app. Same thing here for the API folder, which is where my Azure function is. It's doing an npm install. And then you can see it's doing other stuff too. So right here, it's going to go update an environment file. So you don't see this in my project, but what it will do is create a local configs folder or file that'll be in the root of my project. And it's going to add in all of these properties, which it'll have a browser property set to none, an HTTPS property set to true. It'll have a property called React App Client ID and set it equal to the value in the environment variable that's coming from the environment variables that were previously set. It's doing the exact same thing for my Azure Function app as well. Once all that stuff is done, that's part of the deploy phase, and then my app is going to spin up, right, and start running locally. That's doing by my Visual Studio Code, where it's spinning up a web process to host the React app. It's spinning up a Azure Function process to be able to spin up the server-side part of my application. If I look over here at the Teams app one, though, it has an additional phase here called Publish. So if I look at this one, what is it doing? Well, it's doing the same thing, validating the manifest and then building the app package based on the latest environment variables. And then it's validating the app package. But what you'll notice here that's different is it's publishing the app package up to Microsoft, Microsoft 365, specifically to our Teams app catalog in our tenant. All right. And you can see other things here that this one does in production. So like in production on the deploy one, this one is also going to run where is it? Or in the provision phase, ARM deploy. It is going to use the infrastructure file here on my production instance. I don't do this in my local environment, but I do it in my production environment, where the provisioning phase is going to run a ARM template, specifically this bicep file inside my project. And if I look at this bicep file, this one's doing things like creating an Azure static web app, setting up a server farm to host the app, setting up a setting up a server farm to host the Azure function, then setting up a function app that's going to use this server farm that was just created. You can see that listed down here. And setting up a bunch of environment variable properties on our Azure function. It's then going onto our sites, and it's going to set up our authentication settings on our application as well. So that's just when you say, like, when you're asking like what happens during these steps, if you look at the stuff that I've got listed here, each one of these things that you see that are listed, so like uses ARM deploy or uses Teams app create, all of these things are called actions. So if you scroll to the top of the file, you'll see this link here where it talks about Teams FX actions. That will take you to a page in the GitHub repo, in the Teams Toolkit GitHub repo, that'll list all of the available actions. You can think of these actions very much like GitHub actions that we have for like GitHub workflows. They're modeled using the same syntax, using YAML, using the uses keyword, using the with keyword. This write to environment file, that's something that was that's unique to the Teams actions. But you can list all of these different see all the actions that are available to you and see what's available, what options are available, what kind of customizations and configurations you can do with each one of these. And there's even one here where you can deal with a, you can even have a script where you can create your own, you can use your own like PowerShell script or your own like Bash script to be able to test that stuff out and see how it works. Cool. All right. Hopefully that answers your question, Daniel, that you had for right here. I don't have any other questions that are currently listed that I see listed in the on the chat. Yep, looks like I'm more called up. Oh, I see. Sebi said you asked the question because you can't imagine one of the examples given by Microsoft to use SharePoint Embed if you create a solution for a company that is to renew the identification card data of their CU. I'm not familiar with that one. I'm not sure what that scenario is or what you're referring to, Savvy. And what do you mean by the CU? Tadane, I see you have a question that says OW to be Microsoft 365 full stack developer and the certification that we need. I'm not sure what you're asking there. I think, are you asking what Microsoft certification do you need to be considered a Microsoft 365 full stack developer? And the answer is, we don't know, because unfortunately, Microsoft retired the certification for Microsoft 365 developers. That was introduced in 2018, and I think it was about 2 years ago, either early last year or 2 years ago, they retired the certification, and they said they were going to have something they were going to replace it with, and we've seen nothing. So there is no certification from Microsoft to be Microsoft 365 developer certified. So there's no certificate. There's nothing that we have today. Right now, unfortunately, we're still waiting on Microsoft to see if they're going to create something and they're going to give us something to where customers who are asking for that actually can have something they can act on. But for now, there's nothing, unfortunately. Okay, I've got about 6 minutes left. I don't see any other questions in the. I don't see any other questions in our. In Discord, I see some conversations going on about the guest user access, and I saw that it's kind of a mix of stuff going between Discord and the chat. But I see someone in the chat saying, I think someone in the chat, some ordinary user. I think that's Mike Zimmerman, based on the discussion going back and forth. But I think what I want to do here, let's talk about our next office hours and just give you a. And if you have any questions, go ahead and post them in the chat. I'll tackle them before we wrap up in about 5 minutes. Our next office hours is going to be on August the 21st. That is at 11 a.m. Eastern time. I've already got that posted on YouTube, so you can go to my YouTube channel. You can click on the go to my YouTube channel. That's just andrewconnell.social/YouTube or voitanos.social/YouTube. That'll redirect you there. You can then click on the live tab, and you can set up the little notification bell to get notified when the next office hours is coming up. However, you also can, if you subscribe to my newsletter, so newsletter.voitanos.io, in the footer of every single email that I send out, there is a link to when the next office hours is going to be. You can also get that info if you're one of my students. You can get that from Discord as well. I've already posted all this stuff into Discord for our August office hours, where you can also download an ICS file to add it add it to your calendar. I'm trying to think what else I was going to say to that. And I also have an email where once you sign up to my newsletter, you can manage your subscription preferences, and you can actually opt in to get an email about a week and a half before the next office hours, where I also ask people to send me your questions that you want answered, so I can get stuff prepared ahead of time. That's how Daniel and Savvy posted their questions. If you are interested in there's a couple of things I'll just throw out there. Where's my links? Let's go here. A couple other things where you can find me coming up. One more thing I do want to mention here. A new blog post there, I mentioned this. I've got some new payment stuff, new options that are available here on that Voitanos is supporting. So previously we supported Afterpay, Google Pay, credit cards, pay by invoice, purchase order. But this is stuff that we added Apple Pay, Google Pay, and this payment plan via Afterpay. We offered those added those back in January. What we've done in the last month or so is we've also added support for another payment plan option from Klarna. This gives you different options. If you create a Klarna account, it doesn't show as many options right now as Afterpay, but if you go to Klarna, you create an account, they do a credit check on you with your consent, all that stuff, and they can offer you additional payment options and payment terms. One option that you can do is you can sign up and do 4 payments every 2 weeks for whatever you're purchasing, whatever course you're purchasing from Voitanos, and that's interest-free. Or there are more extended terms that you can choose to have a payment plan if you want to do that. So offering now payment plans, but through both Afterpay and Klarna, you can choose when you go to checkout which one you want to use. Another option that we've added recently is something called purchasing power parity. What this is that this has a multiplier effect looking at where you reside. So if you're in a country like Brazil or India, or trying to think of some of the other ones, but I think Turkey is one as well. There's over 150 countries that apply to this. If you go to our site and you click on this purchasing power parity, there's a list of all these different countries. So like Fiji or Slovenia or Egypt or even Aruba or Italy. I have different discounts that I offer based on where you live. The only thing I ask of you is you just need to show us some sort of proof of where you live. And for that, you can take a picture of your passport, but cover up all the stuff that is like really PII stuff. So hide things like your address or anything like that. I just need to see a passport from Italy that has your name on there, so I can tell this is you. And if so, we'll send you a discount code where you can get 30% off on whatever you're enrolling with us from. And so we have discounts going all the way up to 60% if you live in some of these countries. So go to our site, search for the country, and you'll see if your country is one of the 150 that we list there. Let's see, that was one thing I was going to share with you. Another thing I was going to share with you here is, yes, if you are in the United States, of course, if you're not in the United States and you're outside and you're from outside the U.S. and you want to join us, you're more than welcome to. But I'm speaking at the TechCon 365 conference in August in Washington, D.C. It's the week of August 12th through the 16th. I've got 2 full-day workshops, one on Teams app dev and one on SharePoint Framework. I also have a couple breakout sessions that are listed here as well. Mastering React hooks for SharePoint Framework and Teams apps, your on-ramp to creating Teams apps with a Teams toolkit for Visual Studio Code, and exploring SharePoint embedded apps. If you register, you use the code AndrewDC100, you save $100 off your registration. I'm also going to be at the ESPC conference in early December in Stockholm, presenting a full-day tutorial and a breakout session as well. I'm doing a session on Zero to Hero building Teams apps for full-stack developers, and exploring SharePoint embedded app development from setup to production-ready apps. If you're interested in joining me for those, you can go check out the links on my site. I'd love to meet you there. And if you are interested in learning Microsoft Teams app development, you can learn more about my program, my 2-month accelerator program, and see what other people have said from different testimonials. You just go to the site under courses, pick the Teams app dev, and then you'll find 2 things. You'll find my free email course that you can sign up for, or my accelerator. And if you scroll to the bottom here, you will find a whole bunch of testimonials from some of my former students who have attended the class. I've done two cohorts of this so far. I'm just wrapping up my 3rd one this week. The next cohort will start in the middle of September. The way that works is that I teach for 2 hours on a Wednesday. You then get some homework, optional homework you can do. You have access to asynchronous coaching. Where is it? What do you get? You get access to asynchronous coaching, which means that you have access in Teams to ask questions, to send a video, to send a recording, and I will get back to you, as do your teammates that are also as part of your cohort. You'll get an answer within 24 hours. And then on the following Monday, we get together for 2 hours for office hours, where you can ask anything you want to talk about. And we just riff on anything 365 dev, primarily Teams app dev, but we can talk about anything. Yeah, it's a great experience. It's an immersive experience, and I've gotten some really good feedback from it. So if you're on my newsletter, you're going to start to hear a little bit more about that coming up, including some expiring discounts that will expire. Like there'll be a registration fee, and then the price goes up as we get closer and closer. So if you're interested, the sooner you sign up, the better. But if you are interested in Teams app dev, shoot me an email. It's just andrew@voitanos.io, or fill out here, apply to join the next Teams app dev cohort, and I will get back to you. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about your background and make sure that this is a good fit for you. And we'll jump on a call and just see if this is a good fit for you, and see if you're interested in joining us in September. All right. The next time we get together is August the 21st for our office hours. So I hope to see everyone there. We're about 3-4 minutes over today, so sorry about that, but I think we got some good stuff today. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining, and I would hope to hear from you soon. I hope to see you in my newsletter, and I hope to see you in our Discord group. Bye, everybody.